Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a few more people that are just coming in, so we'll just wait a minute or two before we kick off today's discussion. Just before we commence, just to let everybody know that we are actually going to be recording this session, and we will share the recording with you and the slides that we're actually going to be presenting to you today. And we will be referring to other materials which we will also make available to you should you wish to have some nighttime reading, which is only fair because we read all of your publications. Right. So Rachel, I'm just checking. I think that was everybody that was in the waiting room. Others may come through, in which case we could admit them as they come through. So with that, Mr. Chairman, can I invite you please to, well, beforehand, can I ask everybody please to put their microphones on mute, just so we don't get any feedback that sometimes comes through. Thank you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll hand over to you for a welcome.
Thank you very much, Glenn. And indeed, from my behalf, welcome all for, I think it's our third media day. We try to be, as an association, as open as possible, communicate with all our members, trustee members, with the industry. And we also feel, as part of our transparency, to engage as much as possible with the media, to give you an update on what we have been doing, what we plan to do, and also to answer any questions that might come up. And in order to maximize our time for that discussion, I suggest we just jump in and start with our presentation and document.
Thank you, Stephen. If we could go to the next slide, please, Rachel. So we've got quite a few things we would like to share with you today, which is a reflection of a very busy year. We will obviously look at things such as industry priorities, look a little bit back to look ahead. We have some new exciting things to announce today, very hot off the press, talking about partnerships, which are key. And then again, we're going to focus on sustainability, which is one of the key aspects that we're addressing as an association. We will, as I mentioned, have a Q&A session towards the end. But if you prefer, we would also be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have after the session via email. Be more than happy to provide any additional material that you may wish. Again, for those of you that joined late, the recording of this and the presentation materials will actually be shared with you after the meeting itself. If we could go to the next slide, please, Rachel. Standard for all of our meetings is we have an antitrust statement. Whilst this call is not as sensitive as perhaps our AGM or others where we have competitors on the call, we would ask you please to avoid specific questions if they arise with regarding to our members in terms of pricing or commissions or actions they may be taking with regards to their customers or commercial plans. Don't anticipate any of those coming, so I think we can move safely on, please, Rachel. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Glenn. To start with, a quick update on what's happening on board level. In the new governance, our Director General acts more or less as a CEO, fully managing the organization, and as a board, we try to bring the industry closer, put a long-term forecast on what we expect as board, and guide and support the team wherever possible. Can we have the next slide? This is the current board. It's a big group of people, very diverse, all the industries, all the regions, very well represented. And I'm really proud and happy that I was able to work with these people in the past 2 years. We have quite some changes coming up because several of these people have changed job, leaving companies, or start towards their end of the career. That means that we have 6 board vacancies coming up, or 6 people that leave, 1 additional board vacancy. So we will have 7 board vacancies coming up. The good news is that we have probably the longest list of candidates willing to join the board since we ever had. And very soon, probably the March period, we will have the voting process going on to replace these people and hopefully have as strong and as visionary people joining the board so that we continue as a board to really give that input and that support towards the team and the industry. One special one is Sanjeev Gadia. He stays on the board, but he steps down as vice chair. I always make the joke, and then Glyn as well, he's buying aircraft like almost every week, so he's really busy. So he has indicated that it's difficult for him to combine all the efforts and the energy as vice chair in combination with his job as CEO from Astral. From my side, a very big thanks to Sanjeev. He was really instrumental in supporting and helping during the whole transition and in the last 4 years building TIACA. So I'm very grateful to him for the work he has done. I'm really happy that he continues as a board member.
Next slide, please, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel. So last year we also had elections from the board for the executives again, and I'm really pleased that I got a strong support and a request from the board to continue. So that is a very rewarding message that I got from everybody, and I'm really appreciative to that one. I'm also really happy that I can welcome two new vice chairs, being Roos from Schiphol and Emir from Miami. As you can see, two vice chairs, because we do want to make sure that when it comes to succession of the leadership, we believe that with two vice chairs, there was a bigger opportunity and an easier way to make sure we have replacement for the chair over time. What we also believe is that with the three people on the executive team, together with the director general, we have a group of 4 people that we are in a better position to take quick decisions, to interact, and avoid that decisions are taken in a too small group of people. So we always have sufficient backup and the double signature approach.
Great. Thank you, Stephen.
And with that, Glyn, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Next slide, please, Rachel. One of the things that's crucial for us, as TIACA is the only global association that represents the entire supply chain, is to make sure that we continue to truly reflect in our membership all the industry sectors. We're very pleased to continue to grow. We have over 450 members now across the board. As you can see, a very large number of freight forwarders, but also have over 50 airlines and over 50 airports and nearly 30 GSSAs, a huge number of ground handlers, very large number of IT suppliers, and an increasing number of shippers as well. So we're very pleased that we do have a good reflection, which allows us then to unite the voice through getting that collective input into our various programs. And with that, if we can go to the next slide, please, Rachel. Because the other aspect of being a global association is to make sure that the membership is actually also drawn from across the globe. And as you can see from here, the largest percentage is actually Europe with 37. We have North America, 23. We then have Latin America with 4%, Middle East 7, Asia 16. We've also got some from Oceania. India is growing, it's 5% now, and also Africa is growing. So the membership is growing in all regions and across all industry sector types, which again is, I think, a testament to the board and the strategies that they put in place and the execution of the association. And also, I think we have to say thank you very much to the media as well, because you do very fairly and give us good coverage of the various activities that we perform, which allows the rest of the world to actually really understand and read about what TIACA is doing for them and with them. So thank you again very much for that. If we go to the next slide, please, Rachel. We've put this in here. This hasn't changed. The board goes through each year to make sure that the industry priorities that we're focusing on are still considered to be the most relevant for the industry going forward. Digitalization and sustainability are probably the first 2 buzzwords that happen at most events, most discussions. You write about them quite a lot with the various activities around the world. And it really is crucial for this industry's future success, is that those two areas of activity in particular are embraced upon. And of course, they can't be successful organizations or an industry without a strong focus on partnership and collaboration. So we're doing our utmost to make sure that we can also support that part of the activity. I'll talk about that a little bit later on in more detail. Next slide, please, Rachel. Safety and security, again, this industry, it's always remains the top priority, more so than ever, particularly as we start talking about the proliferation of smaller shippers coming through on the e-commerce side. Strong focus that we have to have. I think, honestly, we need to do more as an association and more as an industry in making sure that the entire global user community of this great air cargo network is fully conversant with and compliant with the various regulations in place with regards to safe and secure transport of cargo. Liberalization is also increasingly becoming more important, particularly with globalization and with distributed and various different supply chains coming into place. Not all of the global markets are served by passenger aircraft, so the reliance on air cargo moving on freighters will continue. And it's therefore important that the right regulatory regimes are in place so that airlines and their partners can actually deploy the aircraft and deploy the assets in the most efficient and effective manner where the demand is actually prevalent. So we're working a lot with ICAO on moving forward that particular part of the agenda. Value of air cargo and training, very crucial to make sure that we actually get and continue to get the voice of what this industry is doing heard by everybody's ears across the industry, not just our industry, but across the global manufacturing industry, the regulatory bodies, training and education institutions, so we can actually create an environment where the next generation of workforce will look at us as an inclusive and diverse environment upon which they would like to build a career, adding value to what's happening. So a lot of very key priorities, and we're very pleased to be moving forward with all of these. Next slide, please, Rachel. Just looking back a little bit now, because looking back, it's easier to then help to know where we've come from to where we're going. So next slide, please, Rachel. Unfortunately, geopolitical tensions continue to impact. It's not just air cargo, but it is global supply chains. It's also quite sad to note that Russia-Ukraine situation is now coming up for its second anniversary, continues to add cost, time, and complexity, particularly to EU-Asia transference of cargo. With regards to a macroeconomic perspective, inflation, was very pleasing to note, was starting to come under control from most of the major consumer markets. However, the central banks are a little bit cautious in lowering central rates because, of course, they want to make sure that there is no flare-up from perhaps injecting too much cash back into the economy. So that did weigh down a little bit on consumer activity last year, but it's good to see inflation was coming under control. China was slow recovering. It was probably one of the last markets to recover from a international passenger perspective, even though domestic passenger activity was very buoyant. But it's interesting to note that Chinese GDP grew in excess of 5% next year, which shows that there is still continued growth and strength in that particular market as a production center. And of course, it doesn't fail to be noticed by anybody that India is growing significantly, forecast to have GDP last year of in excess of 7%, which is expected to continue for the next few years, as we see particularly India benefiting from a diversified production perspective. E-commerce is one of those unique aspects which, when we talk with our members from across the globe, and when we participate in events across the globe, it's the one aspect which unites all markets. E-commerce is continuing to grow. By different numbering, it's reckoned to have been about 15 to 20% of current volumes. And again, with significant continued growth in terms of number of platforms, we see that TikTok Shop and Temu and others kind of spring up very quickly and now are into $1 billion a month in terms of sales. So a number of new platforms are expected to continue that segment growing forward very positively, which of course bodes very well for this industry. Last year also reflected a huge recovery in the belly capacity. In fact, it actually ended the year at or just above the levels we saw pre-COVID, and coupled with the increased amount of freighter capacity that we saw come on stream when the bellies were a bit subdued in the prior couple of years, meant that capacity has become a situation now where it's quite high in certain markets, and we can anticipate some impact going forward with regards to that. It did last year, of course. That excess capacity in most markets continued to put pressure on yields, which we saw in a downward trend throughout most of the year, with the exception, of course, at the end of the year when we saw the impact of the Red Sea. It was unfortunate because, of course, it meant that that was a disruption to other supply chains, but we did see a somewhat recovery towards the very end of the year, with people looking at moving cargo from the maritime onto air, particularly as longer sailings were envisaged going around the southern Cape of Africa, southern Horn of Africa. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Rachel. What can we expect for this year? Unfortunately, we can continue, and our members are expecting to see the Red Sea impact prevalent for at least the next few months, as the maritime operators have now put their schedules very much around the longer sailings. The impact of the longer sailings is taking out about 6% of global maritime capacity. It's adding 10 to 14 days in sailing times, which has an increase in the overall cost, and therefore the cost of maritime, we're seeing quite some considerable increases in the cost per TEU, which means the differential between air and ocean is narrowed. When we see that differential narrow, we do see an impact, positive impact on air cargo, particularly as there is a consequential impact of the Red Sea, which is a lack of containers, because containers are now taking 3 or 4 weeks, if not longer, to get back to points of origin. So it is having a multiplier effect on actually making air cargo looking more attractive. We saw that in the run-up to the Chinese Spring Festival, and we expect to see that continue certainly for the next few months. I understand it's 36 maritime ships that have been attacked now in the Red Sea, with one having to be abandoned, which is a shame that that is continuing to happen despite the united efforts of several states to actually attack the Houthis and minimize their ability to launch those attacks. We're also seeing continued impact from the Panama Canal, drought conditions, which have been prevalent now since the middle of last year. At normal times of the year, you can expect to see 36 crossings coming through or sailings going through the canal. That was reduced down to 24 in December, but rains at the end of December meant that they didn't have to restrict that any further. There was a fear that that was going to go down to about 18 or 20. So they're maintaining at 24, which is still quite considerably below what they would normally expect. And there is hope for the canal that by April or May, when the rain season starts, that they can actually go back to the normal level. But of course, we are seeing a shift somewhat, perhaps less so on the cargo, because we're seeing more of an increase in West Coast US port activity, and then more inland and perhaps switch to air for dealing in Latin America. From a macroeconomic perspective, we can anticipate that in the second half of this year, we might start to see central banks lowering rates, which will actually give an extra boost to the consumer. There are high levels of inventory currently, so it will take a while once the consumer spending resumes in most of the major markets before we see an impact on supply chain restocking. But second half is anticipated to actually start to see that coming through. Also, talking to our members, we can expect to see some further aircraft retirements this year, following on from quite a few new deliveries that came through last year and continue to get delivered this year. Although some of the production aircraft, we note, are still subject to supply chain delays from a both passenger and cargo perspective. With regards to particular sectors, we anticipate, or our members certainly anticipate, e-commerce continuing to grow in double digits. High tech, which has been subdued the last few years with things like smartphone sales actually down quite considerably, anticipated to rebound somewhat towards the second half of this year. Ultra fast fashion, with Shine and others really accelerating volume and tonnage that's being moved, and again, double-digit growth is expected there. Pharma business and pharma activity again is expected to continue to grow in very solid numbers, as is perishables. And as we saw with just the recent Valentine's Day, the number of fresh flowers that moved again set some very large volume and met some targets, set some records in certain areas. We do anticipate the drop in yields to stabilize. And overall, we do anticipate some volume growth this year, perhaps in the low to middle single digits, perhaps along the lines of 1 times GDP growth for the globe. There is a risk of friendshoring, which particularly could happen, and perhaps even a risk of protectionism, depending on what's happening in what we call the election mega year, which is really, I think, looking at more than 50% of the global populations will be involved in some form of general election or other, with, of course, the US being the larger. We can go to the next slide, please, Rachel. I'm going through these relatively quickly. As I said before, we will have a chance for Q&A at the end, or if you wanted to send emails or something, we'd happy to do it one-on-one at some point in the next day or so. It's interesting to note that of the 100 or so million that is expected to join the consumer class this year, more than a third of that, or about a third of that, is actually going to be coming from India. But most of these are very young, very technically connected, which again bodes well for the e-commerce activity, because I think most of these were born with smartphones in their hands. Certainly, I know from my 2 that I have at home, they somehow are impossible to put them down, which means at some point they're going to be ordering something, probably most days, which does bode well for the future of air cargo, again, as a key driver from e-commerce movements. Next slide, please, Rachel. Stephen?
Yeah, thank you very much, Glenn. Besides all the work that we are doing, we also want to recognize and pay tribute to the good things happening in our industry. At this moment, we have a few awards ourselves, being the Sustainability Awards. We have, of course, the Hall of Fame, and we are also very happy to have received some awards ourselves. So next slide, please, Rachel. Okay, so in Brussels, and as part of our sustainability program, we really believe recognizing the good initiatives happening in the industry is really important. And we sincerely hope that it also inspires other companies to do the same. There are so many good initiatives happening, and sometimes companies and people are underestimating the good things they are doing. So we are really encouraging everybody, the whole industry, to look around in their company and to participate on these awards. We do it not only on environmental, it's people, planet, profit, the whole sustainability scope. And we also have 2 categories, the corporate one and also the small business startup, because we believe that both type of customers or members or companies have an equal but different story to tell. So last year, corporate winner was LATAM. And with the small business startups, we had Regent as the winning company, and which was done after a voting with the 3 finalists during our executive summit in Brussels. And I also would like to take the opportunity to thank CHAMP. When we launched the sustainability program, when it was only an idea, from the beginning, they have supported us and really pushed us to do this. So a big thanks to CHAMP for doing this since the beginning and still doing this. And then, of course, we have our Hall of Fame inductee. Also here, we always ask the industry to participate and to nominate. From all those names coming up from the industry, we make a selection of candidates and write a motivation that goes to the Chairman's Council for final voting. Also here, we would like to encourage the industry to be more creative and more active in helping us to nominate new people. Of course, we want to have people that really made a difference in the industry based on their career, based on initiatives taken. But we do believe that also here we can be more inclusive and more diverse in gender and age and region. That being said, I truly believe that Jean-Claude Delen is a very justified winner of the Hall of Fame award and to be inducted in the Hall of Fame. Jean-Claude has been very instrumental in the growth of DHL Global Forwarding in Europe and Africa, has also been the chairman of FIATA, and has always been very constructive in reaching out to other associations and organizations for collaboration. The fact that, and that's a coincidence because I'm not involved in this whole process, but the fact that he has also been very mentoring for me in the early days of my career, and that we could welcome him in Brussels was a really nice coincidence, but that really made the story complete. So congratulations to Jean-Claude, and look forward to the next list of finalists and winners for next year. And it also goes for the media. Do not hesitate to, when we launch and when we invite people to vote, to write about it. The more people and the more diverse the entries are, the better that we, for us, and that's also what we like as TIACA. And then finally, we have been really trying to put TIACA back on the map. I think that Glenn and the team have done a great job in the past 2 years. And it's really a big honor that also different organizations have recognized TIACA and gave us an award for the work that we are doing. But Glenn, I'll let you speak on this one a little bit, because again, they are for you and the team.
Well, thank you, Stephen, but I also think it reflects all the great work from the board as well. The one of particular note was the Air Transport News Organization of the Year Award. We're join a very illustrious alumni, as prior winners included ICAO and the European EASA Safety Agency for all the great work that they were doing, and ICAO for the work they did during COVID. And this was really a reflection of the work that TIACA is doing to get the voice of their cargo heard in those large arenas of perhaps previously loud voices of the passenger sector where cargo wasn't really considered. So it was very great recognition for all the great work that's being done. So thank you for that, Stephen. So next slide, please, Rachel. So one of the things that also is a part of the core mission of the board is to make sure, as we said at the very beginning, that we truly are seen as a global association. And therefore, it is important that we launch the strategy that the board had put in place to have regional events. In 2023, we had the first successful one in India. And as you can see from the pictures, the level of engagement was really excellent. Next slide, please, Rachel. And we were also then pleased to have our very first event in Africa, again, with great support from the African Airline Association and a lot of great support from the government ministers as well there. So that was really pleasing to see. And again, it's something we want to continue going forward. Next slide, please, Rachel. And then, as Stephen said, the year ended with the most successful executive summit we've had, with over 300 delegates, and included great airport tour. And of course, we had our awards ceremony and some great conference program and discussions. And this is where we launched the Blue Sky community, which I will talk about a little bit later on. So again, we will continue with our outreach and events activity going forward. Next slide, please, Rachel. So what about going forward? What can we expect for this year? Next slide, please. Firstly, I will start with the events. We have 3 events planned for this year. Next slide, please, Rachel. The first one will be coming up next month in Latin America. It's sandwiched straight after the Intermodal, which is a huge trade show that's happening in Sao Paulo annually. So straight after that, we have the TIACA event Latin America. And then the week after that is everybody meets in Hong Kong for the IATA WCS event. So we're looking forward to having a great degree of engagement there. We're working very closely with a number of associations and organizations in Latin America to see if we can bring our global influence to help tackle some of the very specific regional challenges that they are having. Next slide, please, Rachel. We're also very pleased to say that we will be going to another first. We'll be holding our first event in Central Asia. We're going to be holding an event in Kazakhstan, in Astana, in June 19 to 21. We have ministerial, in fact, I think we have presidential support for this, as they want to turn Kazakhstan in particular into an air cargo hub, recognizing the role they play in the railway connectivity from Asia to Europe. And they feel that they'd like to play a similar role with regards to air cargo as well. So we've got a lot of strong support from the Civil Aviation Organization, They will be our partner and our host, and we look forward to sharing more information with you about that event. Should be very exciting for the whole CIS and Central Asian region. Next slide, please, Rachel. And of course, our big flagship event this year is the Air Cargo Forum. It'll be our second time that will be hosted by our permanent location in Miami. We want to build on the success of last time round. We do have a new event partner. We have a new facilities management partner. We're adding social functions. We're adding golf packages. We're also coming up with a series of packages that our organizations have asked us that we've put together for things like customer appreciation and team building. So we want to turn it into an entire experience of not just an event and social networking, but also business building as well. Next slide, please, Rachel. What can people expect? 3,500, in fact, we're looking at probably more close to 4,000. And forgive me for saying that the way we record the numbers of visitors at our events is physically the number of different people. I know there are some different measures that exist in the industry where people count each day. And so if I attend an event 3 days, I count 3 times. We'd rather count the number of actual unique people that attend, so you can see exactly how many people you can actually engage with. We do expect our high C-level attendee, more than 200 exhibitors. Obviously, we always want to put together a good speaking program. Happy to, again, solicit your thoughts as to how you feel our event programs perhaps could be boosted or buoyed with different topics in the program. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We have a golf tournament that we're planning, and of course will be more networking functions than we had last time round. So we're expecting hopefully a very exciting week. Next slide, please, Rachel. And of course, we hope you'll all join us there in Miami. As mentioned at the very beginning, we as an association strongly believe in partnerships, working very closely with all of these organizations. ACI in particular, we're doing a lot of work on the global stage with looking at some global skills programs and projects. The Global Express Association, we're looking at how we can work on the liberalization and customs facilitation. Again, with FIATA, how we can actually look at supply chain resiliency. IATA, we're looking at how we can work more closely on sustainability. AFRA and ALTA, as regional airline associations, have very unique, specific challenges where we can bring our global perspective. And we're very pleased to be working with ICAO on global liberalization and safety programs. And 2 new partners we've picked up in India, which is ACAI and ACFI, who represent the community there, and we're working closely with them on Indian-specific issues. Next slide, please, Rachel. We actually engaged in specific MOUs to cement our relationships, so we have some formal agreements and MOUs in place. We are working now on an ACI one, and with these bodies here, it's very much mutual recognition so that they recognize the role that we can bring in helping their members move forward with the air cargo activity. And it's very, very encouraging to note that a lot of organizations are approaching us as to how we can actually work closely with them, which I think is a testament again to the strong strategies that the board has actually put into place. Next slide, please, Rachel. One of our other key activities is advocating. As we've said before, we do have the benefit of a global membership base, and therefore it's important for us that we can actually unite or speak with a united voice. So there are a number of topics which, as it were, are key and important to the entire community of sectors that make up our membership. Next slide, please, Rachel. And these are some of the key ones. We've mentioned before the industry priorities at the beginning of the presentation today. So these all fall within that, but these are then specific areas of activity. We're doing whatever we can, wherever we can, to help and engage with next generation workforce. That's a key lifeline of making sure this industry is sustainable. Training is a core component of that. I've mentioned liberalization, I've mentioned safety, digitalization. I'll talk a little bit more about sustainability. Sustainable aviation fuel, by all accounts, the investments that's going to be required is going to require huge amounts from private sector. And therefore it's important that the state can support that with whatever measures they can to encourage the use or the investment going into that particular quadrant. We know that the demand for sustainable aviation fuel is going to account for about 60 to 65% of the industry's objective of reaching net zero by 2050. At an ICAO event in Dubai just before the COP meeting last year, the ICAO member states agreed a 5% reduction of CO2 emissions by 2030. And whilst that may not sound like a huge number, it's a 25-fold increase from where we are or where we were last year in terms of usage of sustainable aviation fuel. And that is a minimum. You will find that there will be some states that actually exceed that as they have specific measures in place, and others that will struggle, which is why we need to make sure that it is a globally focused program that everybody can benefit from. We will always continue to advocate for improvement in infrastructure and facilities, particularly as the movement of air cargo is becoming more sensitive now, with a lot more of pharmaceuticals going through. Life sciences, particularly personalized healthcare, does require very specific conditions in which to move the cargo safely and in integrity, uncompromised fashion. We also believe, and this is something very key in Africa and Latin America, is that the taxation programs in place are very restrictive, and it's actually, in our belief, holding back the growth of the air cargo industry. And anything that holds back, as it were, the globalization of a country's ability to move its products to different markets is actually negatively impacting the citizens of those various countries and those various regions. So we will do what we can to add our voice to the argument to simplify and reduce that particular burden. And of course, that's all part of the overall raising of the awareness and the value of the air cargo industry. So quite a few things we'll be working on this year. We expect to do white papers and, of course, include these in our various programs that we put on. Next slide, please, Rachel. I'm going to talk a little bit more about sustainability now and make 3 announcements. We're very pleased to be announcing 2 new services that we will make available to the industry this week. And also we will be launching our Insights report again this week. And the Blue Sky community that we launched at the end of last year, the first one in Brussels, with the support of Brussels Airport and Air Cargo Belgium, is something which we hope will actually be replicated in other communities across the network. Next slide, please, Rachel. Blue Sky is a program we launched. It's about 18 months ago now that we launched this. For those of you that aren't familiar, this is an independent sustainability verification program. It's a desktop exercise where organizations will submit information. It's evidence-based, and then an independent assessor will assess where they stand with regards to a number of key criteria that's included in the sustainability roadmap that we published. And then they will get a personalized dashboard which highlights and reflects where they are doing well, and perhaps highlights areas which they need to focus on perhaps a little bit more. We've had tremendous feedback so far from organizations that have gone through this. And of course, because it's personalized, everybody can expect to be at a different stage of their journey. So the information is very much private to that organization, and they can choose to share with their customers, their partners, or however they deem best. Next slide, please, Rachel. We're very pleased. This is just some of the people that have gone through it. As I said, it's confidential, so it's only those organizations that are allowing us to actually publish that they've gone through the program that we can reflect here. Again, it's a 2-year cycle, so organizations are encouraged then to go away, focus on the areas that they perhaps were a little bit short in, and then come back for a review 2 years later and to demonstrate the progress. Next slide, please, Rachel. Which is a thank you to you. We've been having some great coverage as well. I know a lot of those people that have gone through have issued various press releases highlighting some of the areas that they were pleased with, and others that they felt they need to work on a little bit more. So thank you for the coverage that you've given us. We're very much appreciative of that. Next slide, please, Rachel. This is just the context to remind you that we did publish the Air Cargo Sustainability Roadmap, which actually tracks the industry and compares to the United Nations 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and highlights some of the key programs and initiatives that this industry should engage in to try and reduce our environmental impact whilst improving our impact on communities, people, and overall efficiency and prosperity. We then do the annual survey, and this week we will be launching and publishing the results of the sustainability report. Next slide, please, Rachel. The 8 core components of our sustainability activity is split into environmental impact, society impact, and cultural and leadership impact. Next slide, please, Rachel. And now I'm going to take a few minutes just to give you some of the highlights. The actual report is very extensive. I think it numbers about 60 pages. So I'm just going to have a couple of highlights, maybe about 8 or 10 slides here, that I'll go through relatively quickly because there's a lot of material in them. You'll probably want to study them because it really is very, very fascinating what it's actually revealing about how the industry is moving ahead. Next slide, please, Rachel. And we're very pleased to continue to doing this with Change Horizon. We had an increased number of respondents this year. We're up to 280, getting close to that 300 mark. We had 110 in what we call the core group, which is the airline, airport and ground handler, as the key providers of a lot of these actual services. We then have the customer segment, which are the users really of the system, whether or not it's the freight forwarder or shipper. Then the industry supplier section, influencers, and others. Large number of very senior level, 68% of the people that were at C-level or senior management level that responded to the survey. And we're very pleased to see that it encompassed both large, small, and medium-sized organizations from across all of the regions. So it is very comprehensive and it's very multi-dimensional and covers all the segments effectively. Next slide, please, Rachel.
Glenn, before you continue, can I quickly interrupt? I just want to say goodbye to everybody because I have a flight to catch and I don't want to miss that one. But I trust that they are in good hands with you. It's not that I want to avoid questions, on the contrary. So can we agree that if there's very specific questions or just too difficult questions, you can always address them to me later and then we'll make sure that the journalist gets an answer anyway, okay?
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for taking the time.
Good luck with the rest of the presentation. Thanks a lot, Glenn, and all media partners. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So the first question that we actually ask is, how important is sustainability for your business? And 67%, which is actually a further increase versus last year, say that it's very important and it's mainly driven by business partners, regulators. You can see the listing on the right-hand side. We're up to 80% saying it's important for their customers, employees, a crucial area that's often forgotten, which is we don't just do this externally. We need to do things. We need to make improvements for the internal customer as well, i.e. our employees. Business partners are crucial, challenging each other, which is a way of accelerating developments in this area. Focus and need to support local communities as well as regulators are responding to regulatory pressures. I'm interested to note why the shareholders dropped a little bit, which I'm not really quite sure, but maybe that's because it's already covered by all the other segments. So by the time it gets to, is it important to the shareholders, it's already being active because of the other segments. It's interesting to note as well that there is stronger pressure at the larger organizations, perhaps than the others. And this will be a theme that will come out through some of the other slides. Next slide, please, Rachel. 71% have a strategy. That was really, really encouraging to see. Again, it's across most of the segments, the company types, and of course by region. But we're starting to see again a differential in terms of company size, with 92% of large companies saying they have a strategy, and only half of that the smaller companies. Now, it's not surprising when you consider that smaller organizations have perhaps fewer, well, obviously have fewer staff, so more difficult to dedicate somebody in this area. But it is something that we as an association are going to have to support in, because it is important for everybody to make sure that as the industry users of the system demand things, that all segments can actually respond. Next slide, please, Rachel. What was also interesting is that of those companies that have a strategy, now nearly half are actually producing a specific sustainability report. But again, if you look at the differential, 70% of those are of large companies that reported, yet only 17% of small. This was also part of the reason that drove us to actually launch the Blue Sky program as a way of trying to help small and medium companies have access to an assessment of where they are performing well and perhaps form part of their sustainability report. We were very encouraged to note this was a free-flowing box. We asked people what areas did they reference with regards to sustainability frameworks, and the Blue Sky and the TIACA roadmap featured in there in the top 5, which was very encouraging to note. Next slide, please, Rachel. Again, a lot of great material, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, but when we asked people where they're focusing in terms of reduction of energy consumption and decarbonisation, 76% saying that they're actually focusing on that. Again, most of it is large, but still a good percentage of small and medium. A lot of focus on fleet modernization. If you note, that went from 50 to 75%, which is not just aircraft, but it's also ground vehicles and GSE. Optimization, another way of utilizing the assets better, and therefore has a smaller carbon footprint if you get better utilization. Big increase on focus on cleaner energy and SAF, and another big increase with regards to focusing on weight reductions through lighter weight assets. If we can go to the next slide, please, Rachel. Again, a lot of information in here. When we ask more specifically about asset modernization, 100%, I'm just going to note a couple of the key aspects. 100% of the ground handlers that responded to this survey said that they are renewing their GSEs to become more energy efficient, a lot of electrification of vehicles. 91% of the airlines said that they're modernizing their fleets. So a lot of work has been engaged upon there. Manufacturers, ULD equipment manufacturers and airlines saying they're investing in lighter weight technologies with regards to equipment and ULDs. Again, encouraging to note. Utilization. I'm getting some feedback. Could I ask everybody to make sure that they're on mute, please, just because of some feedback I'm getting?
Hang up or press the pound key for more options.
Hello. I'm getting a phone call, somebody for more options. So please, again, if you're able just to put on mute. Core group saying that they are actually, which is the airlines, the airports and ground handlers, and a large number of IT and data providers are looking at optimization tools and having specific technology that can help optimize. Again, we're seeing a lot of advancements in terms of ULD buildup with 3D visualized technology linked to robotic buildup equipment, which will help utilize and optimize the assets. And now, whilst transition to green buildings looks like a relatively smaller number than the others, within that, it reflects that over 70% of the airports are making big investments in more efficient cargo facilities. Next slide, please, Rachel. Within that, we talk about SAF. Not surprising that the airports and the airlines are focusing much more heavily than the other sectors with regards to SAF, whether or not it's putting in infrastructure to support the blending of SAF into existing jet kerosene supply systems, or actually acquiring through a book and claim system or direct access to SAF by the airlines. What again is something that is interesting to note is that when you look on the left-hand side of this slide, that it's only 2% of the smaller organizations that are actually saying they're actively involved or access to the ability to link in with book and claim or direct access to SAF. Again, an area that we hope needs to get addressed. Just again, a please request to everybody, if you're not on mute, if you can put yourself on mute, just because I'm getting some feedback coming through. Rachel, the next slide, please.
Your call has been forwarded to the voicemail for Steve Thompson.
I'm not sure if everybody else is hearing that, but I'm hearing a call forwarding message quite a lot. With regards to offsetting, this is an area where it actually is part of mandatory schemes. We know that Corsia is kicking in and different emission trading schemes and mandatory offset programs. So this is an area which, again, we're seeing an increase, but from a relatively low level. And it's something we're going to talk about as a new product or a new service we're launching. Next service, please, Rachel. Sorry, next slide. And again, we have to recognize that we, as an industry, part of the aviation community, which is creates a large footprint, physically footprint, and therefore impact of noise and air quality. And very pleasing to note that, for example, 80% of airlines have active programs to reduce their noise footprint. And again, a very large percentage are looking at how they can actually improve air quality, which is again pleasing to note. Next slide, please, Rachel. This is no surprise. Digitalization and innovation is actually leading the way in terms of helping people accelerate modernization activity. It's also good to note here that we are actually seeing small, medium, and large organizations embracing this. So this does go to show that the entire industry is embracing digitalization and innovation. Next slide, please, Rachel. And the last one I'm going to look at for the survey results was looking at the impact in people. Glad to see that even greater numbers, we had good results previous year, but now nearly 80% saying they're investing in training and education, improving the employee experience, and specifically putting programs in place to advance diversity and inclusivity. This is crucial for an industry that employs so many millions around the planet to make sure that we continue to have access to that next generation of workforce. So again, very encouraging to note. Next slide, please, Rachel. So in summary, it's pleasing that the industry is taking action with regards to the sustainability question. The smaller enterprises do have some additional challenges. Again, we have to give credit and commend the airports out there who've got comprehensive strategies and are executing on those. And congratulations to all for digitalization and innovation being embraced with regards to the movements going forward. Next slide, please, Rachel. There are two areas that really came up that we feel that as TIACA we can actually have a positive impact for. Firstly, a lot of the small and medium-sized organizations said that they would actually like to have access to an ability to purchase carbon credits, for example, or even just invest in programs and projects which are having a positive impact on the environment, or a positive impact on society, and a positive impact in communities. So we're very pleased that this week we're actually going to be launching a new service called Investing in Climate Action. It's a platform. If you can click on the first line, please, Rachel. It's a very simple approach. So we're going to have a simple access point from the TIACA website, where we will actually be working with South Pole partner who's got a high degree of specialization in looking at climate positively impacting projects. And then be able to click through here. It's going to go live in a couple of days. So right now, this is the website that's going to be live. So we're going to have additional information on there, as well as links to regulatory frameworks so people can understand what is obliged of them by certain requirements, but moreover, what people would like to do for the right reasons. We as TIACA have made a pledge several years ago that we will offset every year our emissions or CO2 arising from our travel. And this is a platform that we will actually use to do that. If we could click through, please, Rachel, to the second slide, which is, this will be the live site. We have selected an initial portfolio of 6 projects. It's open to everybody. It's not just TIACA members. It'll be an open access program. We wanted to get a range of projects that are actually different parts of the world. So we have solar farms, we have reforestation and vegetation improvements in Mexico, for example, clean water filter distribution in Kenya, more efficient cook stoves in Rwanda, hydroelectric plant, I think we have one in Indonesia, and the solar farms, one is in Vietnam and one is in Argentina. So a mixture of different projects, different regions. If we can click perhaps on the clean water filter, sorry, you see there the different costs, different projects have different costs. This is a cost per ton of CO2 that's verified in terms of the credit. By working with South Pole, we can benefit from their global focus on this area. They constantly work with the various accreditation bodies in place to review the projects to make sure they continue to meet the standards that are established. And then if somebody wants to go in and say, for example, I want to purchase and make an investment that's equivalent, removes 5 tons of CO2, I can just go through and purchase certificates. If I wanted to do it more sustained in terms of just investing in different projects, I can do that. People set up their own account and there's no minimum, no maximum. It's free to use. If you can scroll down, please, Rachel. So each project will have an overview. It will have an impact. It will actually show and demonstrate which of the UN Sustainable Development Goals that it's actually linked to, some of the benefits there in terms of what the impacts are. And then if you scroll down even more, it will also show you which standard this particular project has been verified with. And if you can click on the, thank you, Rachel. This then takes you to the impact registry, which again, transparency is key here. One of the challenges that this industry has is making sure that things are above board. So if you scroll down, if I was to go through and purchase, for example, X number of certificates, it needs to be transparently, or they need to be transparently retired. If you scroll down, then you will actually see the certification documents, how the certificates were retired, by whom. Sometimes that is actually private, but others people actually say we want it to be shown. So it's verifiable and it's trackable and it's transparent. We will continue to monitor, but we feel that this is a unique opportunity now for all organizations in this industry, or even beyond this industry. All individuals and all businesses can actually have access to a platform where if they want to invest in positively impacting projects around the world, they can get certification as well, so they can actually use that as part of their annual ESG reports or CSR reports, for example. And it's bringing it to the masses. So we hope there will be a direct benefit to everybody from this, as well as these particular projects. Back to the presentation, please, Rachel. Very similar to this, another area that came up in the survey is the focus and investment in people and training. But one of the things that's quite prevalent in the history of training is that if you happen to be lucky enough to be located near a training body or near a particular hub that offered training or an institution that offered training, great, your people could get access. But if you are in a remote part of the world, or perhaps have a small number of employees that you can't afford the time or the cost to send somebody away, we want to address that. So also this week, we will be launching the Air Cargo and Logistics Global Training Library. We won't be providing the training, but we want to provide a repository that connects those with training needs with those with training solutions. So if you could click on it, please, Rachel. We have, again, very simple approach. We will categorize the training courses into 12 different categories. We will be inviting our members and non-TIACA members, everybody out there that provides a training course, we will invite them to basically just put them in the repository. And that way, when people go and search, they can actually look for, let's just click on industry knowledge. This is literally just hot off the press this last week. So we've just got a couple that we're working with to help design it. Then if you can click on one of those two, Rachel, the one on the right, I think short track industry courses. And it takes you through, it gives you more information about the course. And then a click through goes through to their website. We won't get involved in the payment. And even with the other project that I just revealed, the payments do not come through us. That's directly with the organizations. We see our role here as to facilitate, is to connect. And then people can actually go through the training library, browse what may be available. We hope over the next few weeks when we can actually start communicating with all of the various people providing courses that we can populate the repository with a lot of courses. And then people can find a course that meets their needs. If they might want one that is classroom, they might want one that's remote, they might want a very brief online, whatever they're looking for, we hope they will be able to find it. So if we can go back to the presentation, please, Rachel. So again, we're very excited about this and see that as the role that we play as facilitators. And lastly, of course, this year we will be announcing in the not too distant future, the opening up of nominations for the Sustainability Awards and the Hall of Fame for 2024. And I believe we have one more slide, Rachel, which is to say that we will be circulating 4 press releases for you this week, where we'll be announcing the Funding Climate Action Platform launch, the Air Cargo and Logistics Training Library launch, the announcement of our first ever event in Kazakhstan, and of course, the full Insights report. We will be sharing that with you So no need to go and look and download that. We'll share a link with you all probably in the next 48 hours with that report, so you can actually, as I say, see all the material. And if we can go to the next slide, please, Rachel. I'm happy to pause here and note that because Stephen left early, we were able to do this within the hour. If Stephen, of course, we'd be here for hours and hours and hours. Actually, perhaps I shouldn't say that with so many journalists on the call. Thank you all very much. I would like to pause if there are any very specific questions that you've got now. If not, as we said before, we'd be more than happy to address anything via email if you wanted more information about something. Lastly, I do want to reaffirm what Stephen has said at the beginning. We have so much appreciation for everything that you do, and not just the positive side, also where you challenge us, because we need to be challenged. We need to be challenged that we might not be doing the right things or enough of the right things, or there's things that we're not doing that you think we should do. We are very open to get your great feedback because you are closest to this industry. Your readers read what's important to them, so therefore you write what's important to them, and therefore I think your eyes and your ears are very important to us. So with that, I will pause. I don't see any questions coming up in the chat. So I've either bored everybody to sleep, in which case I do apologize. If you notice, there was no puns in this. I was going to talk about railway systems, and then I could say that that's on track, but I didn't. I was going to talk about maritime and then say I was going to float some ideas past you, but I didn't. So with that, I think, Rachel, we've hit the hour. I just want to say thank you again to everybody. These are our events that we've got coming up this year. We look forward to seeing you at one of our events or other industry events soon. So thank you all very much, and I wish you a great rest of the afternoon. Bye-bye.